So thank you. It is my pleasure to start by inviting Art Mannion, who's one of the co-chairs of the Framing Working Group, to talk about what is an SBOM and how they've tried to sort of document that. Art does have slides. Okay. We'll put them on that machine.
Sure. And no worries. Thanks, Alan and Evelyn and NTIA. My co-chair, Michelle Jump, can't make it today. She sends her apologies, but we've talked a bunch in the last 3 or 4 weeks. I think I've got everything pretty well synchronized between the two of us and the framing working group. What I'm basically going to talk about is just to highlight the changes in the document since the last in-person meeting. There's only other than general cleanup, which there was plenty to do and still more to do. There's 4 or 5 kind of major things that if you are looking at the diffs, basically you'd want to pay attention to. So those are sort of as an overview. The beginning and end of the document have changed. A conclusion, which is a brand new section, was added. We moved some of the intro material from the intro to the end, reorganized the intro material. So first and last parts of the document got some changes. We added an acknowledgement section, not a major issue, but it's time to start thanking and noticing those who have been in our working group and contributing to this whole document. One sort of conceptual thing that's been going on throughout the whole year or more has been what I'm going to call sort of which way is up or down in the tree orientation. Several of us had a discussion the week of the Black Hat and DEF CON and B-Sides conferences about which way we visualized the supply chain sort of graph or tree, and it turned out for the last year we had opposite ideas. That was probably causing a little bit of communication error. So we sort of worked that out, and then as I was going through this document last week, I think I'm flipping it back again. If I get the slides, which is entirely my fault for being too late, I'll show you the picture I've got. But this is represented in the document. We have a table representation of how an SBOM might look, and we have a tree or a graph. I mean graph database, not just a whatever kind of graph, not a graph like a numbers plotted graph. Does that come? Oh, okay, yeah. If I say the word upstream in a supply chain, that's a part I'm getting from my supplier. And it's got the word up in it, and I see no other way conceptually that can't be sort of north on the piece of paper. I think anything else is going to cause a massive confusion. I think practice is right to left, which is fine, but left to right, sorry. Left to right, so smaller parts on the left flowing towards the final assembled goods on the right. Framing's group is take that picture and 90 degrees to the right. I was very concerned that if we had it completely inverted, that up and down were backwards, we'd have further no end of confusion. So if you imagine a tree, the kind of tree that grows in the woods, right? Rip it out of the ground and shake all the dirt off. You have the roots exposed and the leaves are on top. Turn it upside down, right? Your root suppliers are on top, they're your upstream suppliers. All of these dependencies and chains happen, and at the very bottom somewhere are end user organizations that produce nothing, and they are leaf nodes in the tree. Does that verbal explanation make sense to folks? Does anyone want to disagree? Because now would be a good time to do so. Okay. Other than the practices group having it horizontal, does this conflict with anyone else's work or break anyone else's sort of conceptual paradigm or break the papers we're working on? You're okay with that? Yeah, all right. Also, in terms of the examples, we did sort of collectively come up with across, I guess, 3 of the working groups, the same standardized toy example. So that's resolved, I think, at this point. I don't know if practices is on board with that. It may not matter to your document. Standards and formats and framing are using the same examples so that we don't cause more confusion. Furthermore, from the framing group's point of view, we had a number of sort of sample SBOM examples in our document. Those are all gone except for the table and the upside down tree representation. We're going to point to standards and formats, who did the actual work on reviewing the existing formats and point to their examples. So things like SWID and SPDX, obviously, package URL, a couple others are in there. So the acknowledgement that things exist and you can represent SBOM in them is handled elsewhere.
He just wants to mirror. He doesn't want to mirror.
Sorry, I'm just scrolling through my notes here. That's mainly it for the changes in our doc since then. I don't think I have a whole lot more to add. Most of the work has been, there's been some actual editorial, cleaning up language and punctuation and things like that and formatting. There's been some more material work. I think we're basically dealing with a lot of duplication in the document and making sure we have, two sections that say the same thing. We only need one of them, or two sections that cover the same topic and don't quite agree. We have to work those things out. I think we're down to one of those class of problem left. And then we're cleaned up at that point. Oh wow! Thank you for your noble efforts, Alan. Yeah, this is the important part here. That's the graph version, and you can see this superimposed upside down tree. That's what I was drawing with my hands in the air a minute ago. So I'll leave this up for just a moment, and just going to ask for the last time, hopefully, if this is okay with everyone. You obviously can ignore us and not do it this way, but this is what the framing group's going to say is the way to think about it. So, sorry, Duncan. Yeah.
Thank you, Duncan Sparrow. Okay. So, I guess two-part question. One, is that upside down tree is not in the document, right? That's just for you explaining it to us? Or?
The actual tree image is not in the document.
No, this is what's in the document, right?
This is in the document. Yeah,
right.
Actually, that is probably in the document. There's an even smaller version of that that's simpler. It's just the right half of that.
All right. So my actual question, which might get punted to this afternoon when we get into real issues or whatever, but is what the graph when you showed a tree, that's clearly a tree, so it's the whole thing. When you're showing this one, now stay on SBOM for a second. Is it clear from this document whether that is one SBOM or 8 SBOMs? The whole infamous, one level, n level, is it addressed or is it still punted?
Off the top of my head, I would say it could probably be made more clear. The answer is not to be glib. The answer is yes. It is all of those things. You can focus in and say you can make the SBOM be what you consider it to be. It can be one small branch, one small node. It can be the entire, literally the global single one if you had a big enough amount of memory or storage or something. Again, in the paper, we have just the right half of this. That's an SBOM. When I put this together, I could say I have 2, or that could be 1. It's a little bit philosophical, but the nature of the relationships and the dependencies, I think, is such that we have to allow this sort of not quite arbitrary, but you can select the scope that works for what you need to do. In this example, if I'm that end consumer, I want all of that, right, to know what I have, right? If I'm Acme Software, I only care about my branches from that point back up, right, to some extent. So, again, good point. I think probably we could be more clear about the, infinite recursive nature sort of the thing. So, right. Yeah. Sorry, Josh.
So I'm absorbing the upside down tree, and pardon the pun, it does seem unnatural to have the tree upside down. My vague suggestion is that we talk across the 4 teams and pick an orientation. I know you're offering this up as the proposed one, but and I can explain when we have more time why I think you're probably going to want it the other way. It's because I think the root building blocks don't change very often, but the products built on top of products built on top of products will continue to bloom and flourish. But to his point, my real reason for raising my finger, there's still some confusion amongst some of the MDMs. Like, for example, if you're an Acme medical device maker and you're using one of my products for my day job, which many of them are, they want to list my product and stop there.
Right.
And for this to actually support the vulnerability management use case that started a lot of this, am I affected? Where am I affected? People would need to know what's in my supply as well. Right. So whether it's 1 hop or 2 hops, we've been wrapped around the axle. I'm hoping as we come, near the end of phase 1, we can at least make it painfully obvious with a visual of, Josh's node and beneath has the vulnerable component. And if you don't look past Josh's node, you won't know you have the vulnerable component. So what we call it, the nomenclature we use is less important to me, but a side-by-side example of one that's too blind to help and one that's comprehensive enough to be useful would be an exit criteria for me.
Okay. I believe that is basic to draw those two pictures. I think that's doable. And I'm happy to talk more about orientation, but again, the thing that really flipped me back around was if I just say the word upstream, I just can't, we can talk about it later. So that did bring up another point though quickly. In this picture, you'll see these boxes with the dashed lines. We've wrestled at least on the framing, and I think the standards and formats actually group as well with, and Josh brought this up, right? If somebody just wants the list of things I'm doing, I include, that's one thing. If they don't want further, that could be a problem. But what if you don't know what's further? And can you convey the knowledge there's something else? There is lack of knowledge there's something else. There's no assertion there's something else. I am telling you I have all of the something else. That's a hard question to nail down. The standards and formats group came up with an option. We have it in the framing document currently. I don't know if the standards and formats group still likes that option. So that's in these dashed lines here. It's in the document at the moment. Might be subject to revision or even removal. This is translucency, so I don't know where we ended up on that. Okay.
And sorry, just as a process question for those of you who are listening in on the phone, if you have a question, hit *1 and you'll get on the question queue. Right now I'm not showing anyone, Melinda. Thanks.
Good. More?
Are there further views about orientation? And again, for simplicity, I have many mics. Right, so again, looking just at this part. This is the chance to have this conversation.
Yeah. So do it, yeah.
Well, I would say we should punt it to this afternoon, and I think questions of substance, like one level or n level, take precedence over questions of how nice it looks. If you did want my opinion on how nice it looks, I do think sideways gets around the upstream downstream problem because rivers can come from either right or the left, but upstream everyone always wants up on top. So I do think that picture's upside down, but I actually don't care. I'd rather care about substantive issues.
This may not be actionable, but maybe one way to clarify this, irrespective of the orientation we choose, is making it clear what, those parts versus compound parts versus final goods. If there's some sort of, if we could denote, because final goods assembles are the ones that go through procurement, right? The ones that might get regulated, an operator environment. So maybe just even swim lanes or, a backdrop to this. The orientation won't matter if people can cleanly tell this is a small thing being aggregated into a bigger thing. Yeah.
No, I fully agree the orientation doesn't, as long as you're consistent, doesn't matter what direction it is, the graph math works out fine. I don't really care in that sense. It literally came down to, I was reading Wikipedia and it said the words upstream and downstream. And I thought anything other than this would be horribly confusing. So that's where I went. That's it. So yeah.
So wanted to pick up on Duncan's point around depth. And I think it's important to clarify the work that Art has done of starting the bare minimum versus what someone else may ask for, be it a downstream partner or customer or a regulator. And I think we will have someone from the FDA this afternoon who can clarify the FDA's position. I know a lot of you are in the medical device community where that's very relevant. Anyone else want to touch on the depth question?
I hate being a repeat talker here. One of the things I said to some folks this morning is, as a key supplier to a bunch of medical device makers in the pilot, none of them asked me for my SBOM. And my expectation fully was, you're not going to be able to provide a comprehensive multi-node SBOM unless I give you mine. So it doesn't mean that phase one was meant to be comprehensive. It just means that if that bug happens to be in mine and you don't know what's in mine, then your operator hospital won't know what's in it.
Yeah. Just so I'm going to say that the framing group's position on this is the thing the model we're building or designing or proposing fully supports as many hops as you want to go. The recursive chainedness, dependencyness is built into the model's design. The argument about how many hops you want to go, we're sort of agnostic. I think it should be, if everyone does their job, the whole thing falls together. But the framing group's not going to necessarily argue that it's one or N. The model supports all of these things, or the model won't work is our kind of starting position. Sorry, Duncan, yep.
Thank you, Duncan Sparrow. So the use case group maybe wasn't as recognizing the issue of that would stay open. I think it's actually use case dependent what you need. So I think probably we have to take it upon ourselves. So I'm putting Josh to have to change his stuff on the fly here before he talks. But we probably have to point out that the vulnerability use case assumes it's an N level deep. That if you only have one level, then yes, you can do a certain amount of vulnerability, but you miss the ones in the end. You shouldn't assume it. So using his specific example, he sort of blamed the device manufacturers because they didn't give the SBOM. But in the particular model they were following of one level deep, it's up to the consumer to do that. So it's really the hospitals that didn't do it. So all you hospitals that didn't do it, you might want to be the ones yelling at your vendor as opposed to us. Thank you.
Yeah, and this happened. I mean, we talked about the vulnerability management use case for a moment, a couple times here, but licensing is the same thing. If I don't see the component 3 hops deep that has a GPL on it, I mean, so again, from the framing group, we're being a little bit application agnostic. The model has to support this, or the model won't work. And then you want to come and put your application, go nuts. We're trying to build something that will support your application without telling you what your application is. Someone else who's an expert in that field can come along and do that. And if our model doesn't work, then we have to adjust from there. So, yeah.
And Art, I think a lot of the approaches of one from your group was built on 2 assumptions. One, in a trade-off between maximum utility and ease of adoption. At this stage, we want to prioritize adoption. And 2, if we can actually get that adoption story working, then recursion will give us the depth.
Yep.
And this is a chance for folks to say, that is absolutely ludicrous. But that, I think, was the thinking that went in to this discussion. It was discussed a lot with you.
Yeah, and again, the model design supports recursion. If you choose to go one layer and have a single flat list or a spreadsheet, the model allows that. That's your choice. We do provide for the depth.
I think scientifically that's fair. I think practically, to his point, if we were to map specific use cases to minimum depth, what you'd find is a 1 hop only will support, I think, nearly 0 use cases.
I fully agree, yes.
I think there is also an issue of that if you're taking this into the vulnerability management use case, then it will become necessary, like how far I have to go. It will be depending how much those components are overused or reused in the other places. That will be resulting in your impact calculation. And at some point, I envision you cannot really have really full picture at all the time anyway. I don't think that's really realistic. But when you're putting together your software, your operation or deployment, then you have to be able to manage the forthcoming risks. So you have to be able to see so far as it's important for you. And in this sense, I think it should be also included that when this becomes active, when the particular vulnerability or something will happen, then you are able to go back and start enumerating the other places where it's also having impact. And that's a very important component in the operation later on. Not so much that you have the full picture from the start. Thank you.
And Lori, I think many folks may not know you. Can you introduce yourself to the crowd? Can you introduce yourself, Lori?
Oh, I'm sorry. My name is Lauri Korspan. I'm working with NEC Corporation, and I'm coming from Japan. So I'm kind of like in between the US and then Japan. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions on this depth question?
And building on your point, I think current state, it would be quite difficult to get a comprehensive map. Our belief is as these tool chains spit them out as a byproduct of doing their packaging or builds, getting a more comprehensive thing will be a byproduct of how we compile software. So current state, harder to get comprehensive. Future state, much more comprehensive.
the vision is to actually have a pretty comprehensive list ahead of time so that when something does come out, you find all those vulnerable nodes quickly and can act accordingly. So, but it's hard, yeah.
Further comments on this document or what Art has had a chance to say?
I got one. There's less.
Les.
Habit. So I don't disagree with everything that's being said because I think they're being said in different forms. The one thing I would disagree with is that I think one hop or one level isn't a zero though, right? Yeah. So I just want to make that clear because I think
It's 1. It's not 0. Yeah, I mean, no, it is something.
I like that
You got pressed.
better
Don't
than-
take that down.
It's better than
one,
nothing.
not zero.
Art Mannion said 1 is not 0. The entire process agreed that 1 is not 0. Right. How about
Consensus.
that? All right. Consensus achieved. Good. Yeah. Yeah. Done. 1 is not 0. Publish it.
Anything else that folks want to add in this? So Art, we can provide further details, but if folks who have a chance to read this document and want to provide further details, I'll communicate after this how you can do it. Do you have a timeline or some mechanism, what you'd like right now?
Sure. So the sort of the diffs I've highlighted in this depth and orientation of the graph. The areas I've highlighted. If you have specific concerns about those, the sooner the better. You're welcome to contact me. You're welcome to put a comment in the Google Doc. Get in touch with the entire framing working group. Get on our mailing list if you'd like. Those things are important. If we don't resolve them, that's postponing the delivery and finalization of the document, basically. Otherwise, if you read the doc and have anything else to say, I think at this point our preferred mechanism for feedback is still just at the Google Docs. Anyone with the URL can type in changes, they become comments. It's the normal Google Docs trick. We're doing all the work in there, so that's our wish. Please at this point in the process also, if you've got a thought or an opinion or some words to change, just go do it. Comments saying this could be cleaner is we're not going to probably. I will try to get to them, but basically, provide what you think should be there, or your comment is less likely to be actioned, just for time purposes.
For clarity, you would like that in suggestion mode, not edit mode.
Yeah, but it is so it's configured properly. 2 or 3 of us have edit mode. The rest of the world, if you have the URL, you are in suggestion mode, assuming Google's ACLs are right, which they are. That's how it works. But please feel free to just type in there. That's the easiest thing for us. So yeah.
And you didn't mention a time frame on that. So
yeah.
is this going to stay forever,
Whatever,
or are we
Alan.
actually hoping to get it out at some point?
Whatever. 4 weeks. I think it's a discussion for today, but we want to be at September, end of September.
Why don't you go for the middle of September so we have some recovery time?
Sure.
So September 15th, maybe?
Yeah, give me a couple of
Halfway
Fridays
through.
into September, right?
That's 10 days. You want to do 2 weeks?
2 weeks, yeah.
Sure.
A 2-week window. We'll revisit the overall process a little bit later, but I think that is a good benchmark to start with.
Yeah, 2 weeks is enough time for us to finish the doc, even if we get no comments. But if you do have things to say, yeah. And again, if it's about the fundamental parts, please, very soon, because we need time to resolve those before we go finish the writing. So.
And for folks in the room or watching, if you would like a copy of that URL, I will try to send it out with the notes from today. But you can also reach out to me directly, and I can send you the up-to-date version for that URL.
Right.
Any other questions for Art or the framing group? Linda, I'm not showing anyone in the Q&A queue.
Thank you. No phone questions at this time.
Great, thank you. Oh, Duncan.
One more, sorry for hogging the mic. Again, because Art's up first, he gets stuck with all these, I'll call them process questions. Is it appropriate to ask now next steps, or is that a later agenda topic? Are we going to do it by committee or do it by all at once?
Both of those are phenomenal questions, and we're going to try to tackle that later after lunch today. The goal of this meeting is to sort of say, let's focus on this phase 1 for the moment, and then we're going to say, what will the next phase look like? All right. Well, Thank you, Art. And for those, hope you can get a copy outside of this document. And there's still a little bit of work to do, but you guys have done a phenomenal job. So thank you, everyone who's been part of that process. I know the weekly Friday afternoon calls are a bit rough, and so thank you all for doing that.
All right. Thank you. Yep.
All right.